Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Appreciate everyone being here. I see a lot of familiar faces and a few new faces. So net, for those that have not been here before, it's really technical. I'm going to go through a real quick intro slide to cover the agenda, the topology. Then we're going to jump into the configurations. Please ask any and all questions. I've got my great colleague, Jim, who's a panelist. He'll be able to answer questions. And given time at the end, we can certainly unmute anyone who has a verbal question that we can go ahead and address. And let me just real quickly call out some of the things I'm going to reference today. I've already covered in previous Friday Firepower Hour recordings, which can be found on YouTube. So when we talk about intrusion policies, malware policies, identity policies, all of the above have been covered, but I'll show how these tie into your access control policy today, considering we'll be doing a migration. So, Jim, did you want to take a few minutes and introduce yourself?
Sure. As Paul said, he and I work together. We cover the territory accounts for commercial accounts. I'm based out of Atlanta. I cover Georgia, Tennessee, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Florida. And I came up from SourceFire acquisition, which was a little over 5 years ago, and I'm a consulting security engineer supporting just our security products at Cisco. Thanks.
Perfect. Hey, thanks again for being here, Jim. So the agenda, a lot of things to talk about, review ASA and FTD differences. We'll talk about firepower threat defense policy basics, the access control policy, the intrusion policy, following malware, identity pre-filter. We'll look at the new ASA migration tool, so 1.1 got posted a few weeks ago. I'll be using that. And then we'll go through and do a demo for that and then jump into some post-migration steps. So this is my topology. It looks really busy now. The good news is I'm not using all of these in today lab. I'm basically leveraging a subset. A few things I want to call out. The first thing is I've got a virtual FMC that's managing my virtual FTD. So I've got a virtual FTD that's segmenting my east-west traffic, and I've got a brand new 2110 sitting at my internet edge that I'm going to be migrating the 5506 configs onto that 2110. So that's really the goal for today. And anyone with great ideas or any ideas regarding future topics that you'd like to see regarding to firepower, please shoot me an email. My email is up on the screen. And before you do this, make sure you understand all the videos that I've done in the past that are on YouTube so that we're not duplicating the same topics or features that we've covered. So without further ado, let me go in and jump into my GUI. So anyone who's familiar with the ASA, it's pretty straightforward from how do you manage the ASA. CLI by far, ASDM, Java-based, not real cool, but you've got your ASDM. You could leverage CDO, Cisco Defense Orchestrator Cloud application. Allows me to manage my objects, values of objects, consistent objects, and defining ACLs and NATs. And lastly, we've got Cisco Security Manager, CSM, which allows me to configure policies, not so much for gathering events. For anyone familiar with the ASA, there's the Firepower Services component that is typically managed by an FMC. You could use your ASDM for that. But the FMC, which is what you're looking at on the screen right now, much more verbose than your ASDM from a firepower capabilities. So we talked about ASA being very much object-driven. You create all your objects. Now, I'm going to reference these objects in my NAT rules, in my access control entries, in my ACLs. So it's really much object-driven, but not so much policy-driven. Firepower, on the other hand, is very much policy-driven. Meaning that there's your access control, identity policy, network analysis policy, SSL policy, pre-filter policy. And what I'm going to show today is how these policies integrate with Firepower when you're deploying FTD, which is the Firepower Threat Defense. So again, I've got two devices. They have been registered. And I've got the base, which is just the layer 3, layer 4 threat, which is the IPS, security intelligence, malware, and URL filtering licenses. And I can see the version that I'm running here. Both are running 623. I can see that both are running the blank access control policy. So I cannot register a device and have this managed without an access control policy. So as the name implies, there's nothing really configured here. It is a blank access control policy, meaning everything's wide open, no rules, right? So my default action is network discovery, nothing to deny any type of connectivity. Notice that it's using the default pre-filter. There's no SSL policy, no identity policy, and this is assigned to my two firewalls. One is virtual, one is an appliance. Let me look at a few more things from here. If I go look at my objects, I'm going to see the default objects that come with the FMC. So this FMC, I spun up not too long ago. It is running 623, which is the minimum to run in order to leverage the migration tool. And I've got patch 6 installed on mine. So you want to be patch 3 or better for faster migration speed. So I'll pull up the release notes and the config guide momentarily just to explain a little bit more about this. But here you can see the 14 default objects that come with a default installation. If I go back to my devices, they're both routed mode, but the reason I'm clicking on this, I want to show you that I don't have any interfaces configured. I'm going to click on the routing tab. This will take a few seconds to load up, but I don't have any routes configured on this 2110. The only thing I've done with it is essentially jumped on the console, bootstrapped it, and did config manager register this with my FMC, and then from here it was ready to go. So click on NAT. I don't have any NAT policies, but there's a few things that I have pre-configured, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. If I go to platform setting, I did configure a platform setting for my threat defense appliances or VM, and I call this Ntp Policy. As you can, as the name indicates, this is to synchronize time between my firewalls and my FMC. If I go look at my policies, that's the blank access control, obviously, that I've identified earlier. I've created two intrusion policies. One is in blocking mode, and one is in detection mode. The big difference is that drop when in line checkbox, I've cleared it on this one, so this is great for learning without dropping any packets. Notice that they're not applied to any access control policy, they're not applied on any device. I've also created a malware policy, and this is leveraging all the application protocols. Let me go ahead and edit this so we can see the configuration. It is leveraging every application protocol. I've selected quite a few categories, and I've turned on the Spiro analysis, dynamic analysis, local malware analysis, Again, this is not meant to cover this. This is covered quite extensively in my Friday Firepower Hour session 2, which is on YouTube. So I've pre-configured this, and the last thing I'm going to call out is actually two more things. One is a pre-filter. So I've leveraged my Friday Firepower Hour pre-filter policy. I did not configure anything here, but I'll come back and explain why this is an important part of FTD. If you're running Firepower services, not so much. This is not used. But if you're running FTD, then certainly this pre-filter is used. So actually, I clicked on the edit. I'll give it a few more seconds to have this load up. And again, my default action is to analyze all tunnel traffic. I'll come back to this. And then the last thing to call out is I've integrated this FMC with Active Directory. I've created a realm. I've gone out and created the user agent version 2.3, and the FMC is leveraging that agent. So if I go under my system, and I go under my integrations, you'll see what I'm talking about. So I go to identity sources. So I'm leveraging my user agent. Refresh seems a little slow. It's a little bit faster usually. Maybe I've got too many VMs spun up, but anyways. User agent, here it is. And under my realm, I've created the realm. And if I edit this, you'll see that I'm actually able to see all my 80 users and groups. So now I could come in here, and here's the realm configuration. And again, this is covered in Friday Firepower Hour Session 4. And I could see all my groups. And if I go create a rule, I can now leverage these 80 groups in my access control policy rules, right? Let me close this, and here's this identity policy. So I'm using passive auth, meaning I'm going to capture information from people logging on to 80 servers, and then my agent scrubs this and gets the username to IP mapping, so now we could use this on our within our policies. So again, I clicked on this just to show you that this identity policy is leveraging that realm that I created, and it is a passive discovery, and here is that realm that I've configured, right, Friday Firepower Hour. Enough of this. So now, again, I've pre-configured everything, so now what I want to do is jump to Cisco's website. So the first thing to call out is I go to my Cisco Firepower Next Gen Firewall, and from here I could look at the release notes. And if I scroll down, I could view the release notes then, and you can see 1.0 came out back in July. In October, we got 1.03, and then 1.1 just came out a little over 2 weeks ago. And from here, you can go read the release notes. So I pulled this up from here. This is my install and upgrade guide. So from here, it's a great place to go understand what this tool is all about, what it's going to do. But to me, the most important part really is to understand some limitations, some requirements, and as well as guidelines. So if you're familiar with the 1.0 and the 1.0 and the 1.03, this is slightly different. The 1.1 is slightly different because I have a few more options. It does take a little bit longer, but I want to call out a few things. So, so when we talk about the FMC, you know, you've got to have a smart account because FTD is smart licensing. And then we've got the REST API on the FMC enabled, and this tells me to go and do this. I never already done this. So you go to system under configuration on your system under the REST API preferences and make sure that that checkbox is enabled. So some guidelines from and limitations from an ASA config And the beautiful thing is when you launch the tool, it reminds you of all these requirements, right? Again, interface configurations. If you've got Ether channel on your ASAs, these have to manually be configured on your FTD devices. Enable password cannot be blank on your ASA. You can actually now have a direct connectivity to your ASA. So in the previous release of this tool, I would have to go in and copy my startup to a TFTP and then leverage that TFTP to upload to the FMC via the Firepower migration tool. In 1.1, I can now connect to a live ASA to do and just pull the configs. So again, this is let me jump into the tool at this point in time. So I've downloaded 1.1. And let me show you what this looks like. I'll pull this up here. So I've got all 3 versions. So I'm going to run 1.1. And what this is going to do, it really essentially runs a script in the background. So let me move the script over here. So it's a Python script. Come on, behave. So this will take a few seconds to load, and then it opens up a web page for me. So I'll wait for the web page to open up. It does take a few seconds. Now, as this is loading up, I'm going to call out a few things. It's going to open up a web page, and from that web page, pretty much everything you need to do will be configured from that web page. One thing to call out is once upon a time you accepted the default credentials. You can do that, but now it'll prompt you to reset your password. So now I could agree to send telemetry data to Cisco. That's new in 1.1. But if you do that, then you got to log on with your CCO and so that it knows who's sending the telemetry. I'll do that later. So I'm going to click on the login. And now the old password is the same one as the default Firepower admin, which is admin password, which is admin123 with a capital A. So I'm going to go ahead and type capital ADMIN, and the password is my new password. Well, actually, it's going to want a complex one, so I'll do a complex password. And hopefully they match. Click on the reset, and I didn't think they matched, so I fat fingered that. I was typing too fast. Let's click on the reset and see if this works now. Now the one thing, this needs IP connectivity to my FMC, and here's my FMC. I'm already logged on as admin, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to log out, because I'm going to use the admin credentials to log in, and you can't log in twice with the same account, so I'm going to log out from here, and I'm going to come back to the tool, and now let's go ahead and log in. Oh yeah, I got to retype my new password. So this is the checklist I was talking about, right? We got to make sure we've got IP connectivity to your FMC from whatever you're running the tool from. In my case, I do have IP connectivity. Your FMC is 623 or better, and I'm running 623 patch 6. Make sure you've got an account that has admin privileges. I do have that. Now, an option is the FTD can be joined to your FMC. So in the previous release, you had to have this. Now it's an option. You can migrate the configs without assigning it to a firewall. I think that's pretty cool. And now from an ASA, I can have a CFG or TXT file with the configuration, or I could actually connect to a live ASA now, this is new again in this. It calls out port channel interfaces. This has to be pre-configured on your FTD, and then it'll create your sub interfaces automatically. It can take a long time to when it says migrate, it's really importing all your objects and creating a couple of policies. It's going to create a NAT policy. It's going to create an access control policy. It's going to configure your interfaces, your routing on your firewalls. So you can take some time. So if you're going to walk away and come back, make sure your power option is not set to go in sleep mode. More importantly, make sure your adapter does not go to sleep. And then it does say, hey, we've got to have Google Chrome as our browser. So I'm going to say, let's go ahead and click on New Migration. I'm going to proceed. So this is new. I can connect to my ASA, or I can go ahead and upload my config file. So I've backed up the configs from my 5506. I can actually see the content of that config file. It's going to parse. It takes a few minutes to do this. When it's ready to move forward, the next button will light up in blue, and that'll be an indication that I can proceed. And let me just also identify one important thing. As it goes through, I can view the report as it progresses, but at the same time, if I go to the directory where I've installed the tool, it creates a log. I can come back and review, as well as any and all configuration from a reporting. They're all found here for me. So that's just know that it does store that for you. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the next. So now I need to specify the IP of my remote FMC. I'm going to type this in. I'm going to say connect. If it's able to connect, it's going to prompt me for the credentials. And again, this is new now because before the UI was a little bit different. So in 1.1, I think it looks a little bit better. So what it's going to do at this point is authenticate and authorize to the FMC. It's looking at my device list, which we already saw earlier. I've got a virtual FTD, and I've got a 2110. So at this point, I got to choose my FTD device. And let me show you another cool feature. So in the previous release, I would have to go in and specify the FTD that I want to migrate the configs to. Nowadays, I don't have to. I can say, you know what, just migrate the objects, but don't actually apply it to any firewall, right? So notice I can proceed without FTD, meaning that interfaces and routes won't be migrated, just the objects, and it will create an access control policy for me. In my case, I want this to apply to my 2110, and what we're seeing from an IP addressing, these are the management IPs that I have for these boxes. So I want this to go to my 2110, and I'm going to click on Done. So now there's a couple of options. Maybe I don't want to migrate my interfaces. Maybe I don't want to migrate NAT for that box. So it's pretty cool. Now, the other important part is when it says migrate only a reference object. So on my ASA configuration, maybe I've got 75 objects created, but only 60 are in use. So if 60 are in use, by checking this box, only those objects are going to be migrated. Only the ones referenced in my config that are being used in NAT and in my access control list. So I don't want this. So this is typically for optimization, not to migrate the entire object list. But in my case, I want to go ahead and migrate everything. I'm going to click on the next. So now we're talking about physical interface mappings. So my 5506, I was leveraging 3 interfaces, one for the inside, outside, and DMZ. So now I'm going to need to map these to my 2110. Notice that it defaults with the numbering scheme, but physically connected, I'm going to leverage 11, 12, and then 13. So this is from a physical connectivity. And then the next step, it's, well, what's the logical interface, or also known as my name ifs. So I've got 3 name ifs, inside, outside, and DMZ. this FMC, again, because it's newly installed, I don't have any of these zones pre-created. If this is an existing FMC and I'm already managing a few firewalls, maybe these zones are already created and I could leverage them. But since they're not I did not pre-create these, I'll have the option in this tool to automatically create this for me. So if I, from the drop down, notice that I don't have interface groups or logical zones. So if I click on the auto create, I can say, yeah, it'll do both for me. And it's pretty intuitive. It's going to take my logical name and use that, and it is going to match the case, actually, and it's going to go ahead and append an A for automatic, right? So it's automatically creating this for me. I'll give it a few more minutes to go through. Perfect. So it created the logical zone, the interface groups. I'm going to go ahead and click on the next. Some new features and functionality here, which I really, really enjoy a lot as well. So I'm going to see all my ACLs. I can see the network object names. I can check this box, and I can say, you know what, maybe I don't want to migrate this, right? Don't migrate this. If I check that, it basically null and voids it and does not get migrated. But the other thing to call out is notice that this is my IPS policy, this is my file policy, and this is logging. Huh? That's pretty cool. I can check this box now, and I can say, you know what, let's go ahead and add a file policy. If you recall, I created that Friday Firepower Hour malware policy earlier. So now I can come in here and do all my policy mappings once and then upload these policies. And this is the policy I want. Let's go ahead and check that box. Perfect. So now notice that this lights up. I've got the malware policy assigned to this. And I can now click on my NATs and view my network objects. My network objects is the next tab. And again, maybe I don't want this to be called obj_any. Maybe I don't want this to be called laptop. I can check this box and now say, you know what, let's go ahead and rename this from laptop to whatever I want. So it's pretty cool from a functionality perspective. This is all new. I can view my port objects, and I can do the same thing. I could do the renaming here if I wanted to. I can view the physical interfaces and the logical interfaces and the corresponding IP addresses, and then I could view the statics that I've got. I'm going to click on the Validate button. This should not take very long. Essentially, all I've done is added my malware policy to the first rule. And again, once it's validated, it's going to give me a Next button. So in this case, I'm done. It's validating everything. So I'm going to click on the Push configuration. So let's explain what's actually going on at this point. I think that the word push is a little misleading because it's not pushing anything. So at this point in time, it's actually capturing all the objects that the config file has. It's going to go ahead and create two policies. First off, it's going to create my access control policy. It's going to take my 2110 and assign it to that policy, and then it's going to go ahead and insert all the rules into that policy. The second policy it's going to configure is my NAT policy. It's going to take all the objects and put them under my objects in the FMC as well. But what it's not going to do is actually deploy it to that device. So the push in my mind is kind of synonymous with deploy. So I would prefer if they would use import or create from a terminology as opposed to push. Now, how long this takes, it really depends on, the size of your config file, the number of objects. In my case, this will probably take me about 3 minutes, maybe 4 minutes to go through this. And while this goes through, the next logical thing for me to do after this completes, because essentially once it goes through this, I'll be done with the migration tool. is to log back into my FMC and review everything and compare that to your ASA. With that, let me pause. And Jim, how are we doing on questions?
I have none right now.
So people, we've got about 3 to 4 minutes while this goes through. Anyone has a question that you would like to be unmuted for a verbal question, let Jim know. We will be more than happy to unmute you so we can have this verbal question. It sounds pretty straightforward, doesn't it? I always say the devil's in the details. So, I mean, I've ran through this quite a few times. The interface section is by far what takes the longest. Once you get through the interfaces in the migration process, the objects and the NAT go pretty fast. And while this is doing, actually, let me do this. You can actually see what it's doing from a configuration perspective, right? You can actually see your objects that the script runs, and we can actually see it's fetching, it's getting, and as it goes through. Any questions? Nothing's coming up?
Nope, we look good. Must be doing a great job.
And what I'll do is I'll put this here in the chat window as well.
Yeah, and I just posted a link to your older recordings, so if people want to get more information.
Excellent. Thank you, Jim.
Mm-hmm.
So this is my 111.62. I've got another FMC running also, 111.61. This is the old FMC that I've always used. This is managing NGIPS, it's managing firepower services, it's managing FTD, and I've been using this one for quite some time. Always have it ready in case I need to pull up another pre-configured FMC. So there we go. Interface is just wrapped up. It's going to go through my objects, and from this point on, it should be quite faster than the interface piece. Was there any great question that was asked that maybe we can verbally take, Jim? I have not looked.
There's nothing in the Q&A panel right now.
Okay. Has this so far been a good session, folks? Go ahead and give me a big yay. I say that, but people can't actually add their mute on entry, but they can certainly give me a green checkbox. Yeah, perfect. John, I see that. Thank you.
I got some positive feedback in the chat window.
Most excellent. I see Greg's green check. Appreciate it. And this is almost actually all done. So the good news is we knocked this out. It seems like it's a long 3 to 4 minutes. That's about the time it took. So I could download the report, or as I stated earlier, all this here is actually found in my repository wherever I launch the application. I'm going to go ahead and close this. I'm done. So what I want to do at this point in time is log back into my FMC. So let's go ahead and log in. I'll tell you right now, I'm going to get an error message because the tool is still logged in. So now this is done. I'm going to close this tool. But when I try to log in, it's going to say, wait a minute, you're already logged in. I'm going to say, yeah, I know. try to log me in again, right? Say you're already logged in. That's because the process that the script uses, the Python script uses, even though when I close it, it's still lingering behind the scene. So I'm still going to say, yeah, proceed, and it's going to allow me to get logged in. So now we'll go back in and review quite a few things. So first and foremost, let's go look at my devices, and I want to look at that 2110 specifically. So here's that 2110. Nothing's changed except that the blank access control policy has a little black circle with an exclamation point. It says this policy is out of date. Let me go ahead and edit this firewall and notice that it's actually configured my Ethernet 11, 12, 13. So I did not plug in 11 and 12 because that's the same IP as my 5506, which it's still plugged right now. So once I unplug my 5506 and plug into my 2110, I'll be good to go. But you can actually see the IP addresses. The interfaces are enabled. Let me click on my routing. I should see all my statics that are listed here. Give this again a few seconds to refresh. Let me go to my static routes, and here they are listed. Let me go look at my NAT policy. So notice that it creates one. It uses FTD Mig for migration with this beautiful number, and it tells me this got migrated from my ASA with the host name ASA SFR. I think this is a cool thing to have because if you're down the road wondering, hey, where did this policy come from, I can tell you this is where it came from. So now I'm going to rename this to my 2110 underscore NAT, and I could manipulate my NAT rules if I wanted to. Let me go ahead and save this. Let me go look at my objects, and you'll notice that it will have created additional objects that were not there before. So originally, if I had 14 objects, I should have, whatever the number of objects I migrated. All right, so now if I scroll down, I'm up to 36 objects, and I could actually see my home, my DNS server, my DMZ, core Bleda, and let me click on the next page, and I'll see the remaining objects, my Win7, test, umbrella servers, object, group, my laptop. So they're all here. Beautiful, beautiful. So now let's go look at my access control policy. And notice earlier this was applied to 2 devices and it was up to date. Now it's only applied to 1 device because it took the 2110 and targeted that device with this newly created access control policy. So just like the NAT policy, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to go ahead and edit or rename the name of this policy. So let me wait for this to refresh. I like the description. I'm going to keep this, but this, I'm going to call this my Internet ACP for Access Control Policy. And here's all the different rules that it actually imported. And notice that the file and malware policy that I've leveraged, it's still here. So now I can come in and confirm that, yes, it is leveraging this file and malware policy. So from here, I could now assign my intrusion policy if I wanted to. If I didn't do this from the previous migration step, I could do it from here. There's an important part. There's a really, really important part. Let me just save this, but I want to come back and show you graphically speaking. I did not turn login on from the migration tool with a purpose because I wanted to see that by default nothing is logged. So if you're setting this up and you want to troubleshoot, you want to see what's going on, you need to go ahead and click on this little scroll, and you want to log either at the beginning, at the end, or both. For troubleshooting purpose, you definitely want to log at the beginning to see if connection is happening or not. If you're triggering a correlation policy. If you're wondering what that is, go watch my Friday Firepower Hour Session 1 correlation event. You typically want this to happen, trigger when it happens, but the log at the end of the connection gives me more verbose information about the duration of the connection and the amount of data that passed through that connection. And when I click on the save, that log scroll lights up in blue, indicating that logging's turned on, but it's not turned on for any one of the other rules, right? So from here, I could modify any of these rules. There's a couple of things I'm going to modify here, and I want you to pay attention. So let's say that I'm going to say, people can or cannot access. So I'm going to pick on rule number 5 as an example for whatever reason. If I go look under my users, it says identity policy with authentication rules required. So I cannot actually have a rule for users without an identity policy. So I'm going to cancel this and say yes, and I click on under identity policy. And if you recall, I pre-created this. So now when I add my identity policy, I can come back to my rule number 5 and leverage AD groups and users into my into this policy. And here's all the different users, all my different groups, and maybe this is only for my, I don't know, the security team, and for maybe the help desk. Is there a help desk in here? I thought there was, maybe not. Let me search for help desk. Nope, no help desk. Well, I guess it's only for the security team. Let me go ahead and save this. And here it is, right? And if you recall, the other thing I called out is a pre-filter policy. So let me explain a little bit more about the pre-filter policy. So I created the Friday Firepower Hour pre-filter policy. I'm going to say okay. So now, actually, let me go back in and modify this and edit this. So if you think about Firepower services, the traffic that Firepower will see has to, number one, be allowed through the ASA, and then it needs to hit your access control list that we redirect the traffic to that Firepower service. So if you don't want that traffic to go to the Firepower service or module on a 5585, what you're going to do is deny that traffic as opposed to permitting it. So I want you to think about that logically. So it goes through the ASA and then Firepower. Well, the pre-filter, think of it as your ASA. So it's a mouthful, but it really is. So if I click on Add a Pre-Filter Rule, this is my Layer 3. I could come in here and use maybe traffic between inside to outside, inside to DMZ. Maybe I'm looking at source and destination, and here's the options. I could come up and say block it. So this is my Layer 3 block. Why send the traffic through the ASA to the Firepower service to have it blocked there if I can block it further out? So this is the same concept. If I block traffic, so any and all traffic between the outside to my AD server, and I want to go ahead and log that, because it's a block action, there's no logging at the end, there's no end to the connection. It never happens, right? And I could be specific and say over the following ports, right? So maybe I want it over specific ports, or maybe I want to create my new port, and I'm going to create one, I don't know, call it LDAP or whatever that might be. So the point is, this pre-filter dictates what traffic gets blocked prior to hitting Snort Engine. Maybe I want to come down here and say fast path. Fast path is, I'm going to give you a couple of examples. I'm deploying this Firepower device in my data center, and I happen to have either replication traffic between data center 1 and 2 going through my firewall. Maybe I've got backup traffic. Maybe I don't want that traffic to be inspected, but if you know that the traffic is coming from a specific IP going to a specific IP, I can create object, and fastpath implies going to that access control list on the ASA and not redirecting that traffic to the firepower module, meaning let it go through without me inspecting it, right? So this is great for elephant flows. It's great for traffic that you want to exempt from inspection. And notice that login, I have an option now to log at the end of the connection. So this is, I can actually confirm that login or the traffic is being bypassed. And then lastly, analyze is saying, well, send the traffic to snort. So a good use case for this would be, I'm going to come in here, create all my block rules, all my fast path rules, and notice that my default action is to analyze traffic. So basically, I do my blocks, do my fast path, and let everything else come back to my access control policy, where now we can take a deeper inspection of whatever traffic. And from now on, I can come up here and say, you know what, I want to add rules that have applications. Maybe I want to have rules that block specific URLs. And then you can move these up and down based on your requirements. So again, let me just cancel this out. Let me save this. And the last thing I'm going to demonstrate is when I click on the Save button, or on the Deploy button, I should say, here it is, that 2110. And now I can actually confirm that here's that NAT policy. It's called 2110_NAT. I've added my identity policy. I've added this file policy. It's actually already there. And basically, essentially, all the configs that I'm adding, I can view them. And so now the beautiful thing now is it says all firepower threat devices may have inspect interruptions. This takes me online to the config guide, which explains to me what this is. And it tells me right here, when I deploy this, I will have inspect interruptions. Let me click on the Deploy button. This will take a few minutes to deploy. And again, how long it takes depends on the device, depends on the size of your policy and what's configured in your policy. So let's come up here and track this under my deployments. I give you all my tasks that I've pre-configured from earlier on, and essentially let this run. And once it's deployed, then I can go ahead and unplug my 5506 cables and plug them into my 2110. And obviously, once the configs are spot on the way I want them to be. With that, let me be quiet and see if there's any questions. We've got about 9 minutes left, so any and all questions are open at this point in time.
I'm not seeing anything on my side, Paul.
Thank you, Jim. If anyone needs to be unmuted, let Jim know in via chat. At this point in time, we will be more than happy to unmute you to take verbal questions. And by the way, if you subscribe to my YouTube channel, when new videos are uploaded, you will get a notification. And this video should be uploaded sometime this weekend. I got to convert it first, and then upload it and do the fun stuff. So it should be done by sometime this weekend. Are these useful videos, guys? I know they're 1 hour long, but is this a good use of your time? I see everyone yelling in the background. I'm going to imagine hearing everyone yelling, yes, Paul, fantastic. Hey, thank you, Greg. Appreciate that. Appreciate this, folks. So I'm up to 92% deployed, a little over 2 minutes. So I'm guessing in about 1 minute or so, it should be done. And now keep in mind, I did not touch security intelligence on this ACP, but for sure, I would have leveraged ACP considering this is an internet edge firewall. If you're wondering, well, what is security intelligence? Look at my YouTube video, Friday Firepower Hour, Session 2. I cover security intelligence. Session 3 is everything you wanted to know about intrusion prevention, but we're afraid to ask. So I do a deep dive on IPS. $95% done. We're getting there. Hey, thank you, Gerald. Appreciate it. Appreciate it, buddy. I also see my colleague, Wes Noonan, has joined. Hey, Wes, I'm going to move you up to a panelist. I can't. Are you able to do that, Jim? Take Wes Noonan.
Sure.
And let's go ahead and unmute him.
It doesn't show that he's muted.
No, I've just unmuted him.
Oh, okay.
Hey, Wes, are you there?
Hey, I am.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. I'm on my back patio.
I didn't ask where you were.
just giving you a heads up.
Just so you know, Texans are going to lose this weekend. They're not really, but I'm just saying that to spite you, right?
Yeah, I think you're confusing us with the Cowboys.
I'll be quiet.
What are you guys on, a 4-game lose streak? Is that what it is?
Well, yeah, I think everyone's trying to get Jason Garrett fired, so they're doing a pretty good job at it. Hey, let's come back to this. The deployment completed. Actually says terminated. Well, actually says successful. But here's the yeah, that's fine. It's letting me know, hey, you're not getting any links, any traffic from your links. Like, as I stated earlier, I have not unplugged my 5506 to plug it into my 2110, but that's essentially what this is complaining about. To that point, this wraps up the session. Hopefully, it's been a good use of everyone's time. Thank you for being here. Just a couple quick things. If you have ideas for future Friday Firepower Hour, please send me an email. If you have any comments, please let us know how we can make this better. Cisco really appreciates you investing in security with us. We are here to support you guys and make sure you guys leverage the products to the best of what they're intended for. With that, I'll be quiet. If there's no further questions, have yourself a wonderful weekend.
Hey, Paul, just want to say thanks as always for doing this.
No, you bet, buddy. You bet, buddy. You bet. Appreciate it. And feel free to stop the recording, Jim.